And what value am I going to bring in that particular space? And so what I found is that I would come in and try to talk to Andy about things that were archaic. I'm coming in talking to Andy like I'm moving on this water bottle. And really what I'm talking about is a much more complex sale that I haven't even earned the right because I haven't developed a relationship with Andy to do that.
Well, welcome, Kareim.
Glad to be here.
You've been kind enough to come out to Northern Colorado, spend a couple days with me, which has been a pleasure.
Woo!
And I'm excited what we're about to talk about. If you're an insurance advisor, agency principal, anybody in this industry, what you're about to hear, I think, is going to be very, very impactful. You may actually disagree with what we're about to talk about, but it's definitely relevant. The one thing you're not going to be able to say is, I'm not aware of this.
Not at all.
I don't think this is going on.
We're taking that off the table.
So
no holds barred, baby.
We're bringing back black and white truth about benefit advising. And what Kareim and I are on a mission to do is change the way this industry is moving forward. And what we're seeing right now is a lack of how our future leaders are being trained. Would that be a good way of saying it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we think about leadership and looking at how we're training those leaders moving forward, there's just a disconnect, right? And so we know that there is a place that we have to play in helping folks to move from where we are today if we're going to see this industry continue to thrive. Without having that, it's going to be a challenge for us, man. And I think we're seeing it right now in individual agencies. We're seeing it in carriers. We're just seeing anytime you got to call old guys to come back into the game, bro, that means there's a lack of leadership training going on.
Well, and here's what we're going to be doing with it, right? I mean, if you think about why you and I are doing this together.
Yes.
We were talking about this morning. You know, you've been an agency owner how long?
Since 2006.
So 16 years.
16 years.
Truth be told, I've never owned an agency, but you know what? I am that guy who has jumped around a lot of agencies. Why? Because of the lack of training.
Yeah.
The things I was trying to do, I was either not taught how to do, or I was given complete pushback as to how I wanted to do it. So eventually I became unemployable and said, hell, I'm going to go do this myself, and I'm going to go help others do this.
and look, and let me say this for everybody. We appreciate you, man.
Well,
because it's necessary. So we appreciate you. Absolutely.
So let's just level set. What the hell are we talking about? Well, black and white truth, you and I started this, I think it was at the Ascend conference.
It was.
You and I first went on camera.
It was.
This idea. But really this has now taken a life of its own and we'll talk about this, where we are headed next with this and how we're going to give back to the industry.
Yes.
To really help the insurance industry develop tomorrow's leaders.
Yes.
Because I think you and I can both agree that is lacking.
Yes.
And the way we're training people today. I was just telling you this morning about, I coach advisors through our academies. Some come from the industry, some start their career and they've come from a completely different industry. And they come into this world called insurance and are given no training.
Zero.
It blows me away.
But it's been going on for so long, though, man.
Why do you think that's happening?
I just think that folks have not taken the time to invest in my process, right? And we like to think that just follow my way and watch what I do, and that's just going to be the way that you sell. And we just know that that's just not what happens when we bring people from other industries, when we bring people that even have been in our industry that haven't been trained properly. Then what we find is that, again, they burn out quick. We don't have them as long as we need to have them. And those are people that we know that could ultimately be leaders long term, but we just have not given them the tool set. And we just think through osmosis, it's just going to, and you know why I can say that? Because I'm damn guilty. I did.
Tell your story. I know a lot of people have heard your story. Tell your story, how you got forced out.
Got forced out. It was forced out.
And then came back in, and now I've had a lot of success. But tell that story.
I mean, it's just that simple because I thought that when we started talking about the gift of gab, right? You started thinking, when you hire people, you're like, oh, they got a great personality. They've got the gift of gab. They're quick. None of those things made a difference for me being trained, though, right? None of those things I had some intangible stuff that I just came with. It's like a great athlete, right? They just had natural skill set. But until you teach them the game, they just had a great skill set, right? But they've got to understand how to take that skill set and apply it to the game. And so I come into the business and I'm thinking, yep, gift the gab, I can go out and talk. And I failed
And
miserably.
with a mom.
And with
who's
her
already in the
mom's
industry.
already in the industry. You know, she's in the industry, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay. And not that I'm judging mom, I'm like, shit, she can do it, I know. And my mom is sharp. Mom has a Rutgers degree, right? Master's degree from Rutgers. So, I mean, she's a very sharp lady. And so, but I'm still just kind of looking and saying, well, mom's outgoing, but she's not like me. Like, I can get, man, failed miserably and didn't work for her, and she fired me, right? And part of that we're looking at is that when I looked at that training, I was always looking and saying, well, what was this? But she did the best thing for me in the beginning, which that she sent me to New York Life, which I got extensive amount of training in terms of industry knowledge. In terms of going in positioning that industry knowledge did not have. And I think that that is still what is occurring today is I'll bring you in and teach you everything about my product, my life insurance, my disability, my health insurance. You'll know the product, but how do we go out and position that? How do I go out and get in front of people on a regular basis? I just didn't have that, man. And so here it is, I leave, I go teach school. I come back into the industry, and this industry, I come back in and I look and I say, well, what's different now? And I remember my mother saying to me, well, what are you going to do differently? And I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe I'm going to do this little 4-letter word that nobody likes called work. I'm going to actually go do something. I'm going to actually take something and go with it. But I then started looking for different training systems to figure out what it was. And one of the things that I figured out, and I know we're going to talk about this somewhat, Andy, is that a lot of times you go searching for those things, and the things you have are right there in your face, just waiting your recognition of them. And I realized that as much as I was going out chasing all these different things, I had a blueprint. I had not followed that blueprint. And had I followed that blueprint earlier, I probably would have had success a lot sooner. So then you fast forward, I have some success, I continue to build, and then I start looking at it saying, I'm doing the exact same thing. When I was building the agency, someone said, come, how are you going to train these guys? Get in the car with me, come ride with me, watch what I do, and tomorrow I'm going to put you out in front of folks and you do the exact same thing. The worst damn training ever. And it didn't work because they weren't me. And I was trying to make them me as opposed to helping them to be the best them. And so I think that's what we're talking about now, is that when we look at these agency owners, we look at these folks that are saying, no, it's not about what you did 20 years ago that helped you to be successful. It's about looking at Andy's skill sets, looking at Kareem's skill sets, and figuring out how do I focus that in the training to make sure that Andy's going to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's a great jumping off point is, worst case, there's a zero training, which still happens today. But just above worse is the type of training that's happening today in this industry.
Correct.
And it's very outdated. And you kind of just hit it on the head. There's a lot of pride in how you sold 25, 30 years ago, and you're still teaching those tactics to producers.
Correct.
Because you're proud of that. And you should be proud of the book you've built, the success you've had. But the problem is the world has evolved. Your strategy has not.
Strategy stayed the same. And so I'm looking at you, Andy. You come to my office, see all these wonderful plaques on the wall, these trophies. I did this. You know what? I did 30 door knocks for that one right there. And I did 100 cold calls for that one right there. And you too, Andy, can be successful if you do 30 door knocks and you do 100 cold calls.
Well, I remember being in a meeting, a sales meeting. It wasn't all that long ago. And I remember sitting there. It was a virtual, because it was right before the pandemic. And I was joining the call from my house. And I remember our leader spending an hour of that sales meeting, which was the whole meeting, telling us that the best thing we should do right now as far as production goes is to get in our cars and drive to rural parts of our markets and spend a couple days going door to door. This was 3 years ago.
How did that work with you?
Well, I didn't even, as quickly as that went in my head, Kareem, it went out my head. But to your point, how many times is that happening in this industry where you, because it's your strategy that worked in 1998, are so damn proud to talk about that, but your team is looking at you going, really?
Right. It happens all the time. And I've watched it happen. And again, being an agency owner, I was guilty of it. I was guilty of like, well, here's the only way I know to go do it is go do X, Y, and Z. You, again, watch me do what I do and replicate that. And that was the worst training ever. And I'm looking at folks that are still doing that and talking about, like we said, we're talking about antiquated ways of going out. And here's the problem with this, Andy. Here it is. I'm 50 now. I'm trying to attract a 24, 25-year-old kid and tell him or her that they need to go out and do the exact same things that I've done from 25 years ago when I started building a business. And they're looking at me like, "Get old man." They're looking at me and calling me an old man. I never thought I would be the old man, Andy. 50 years old. Old man, this old man is crazy. He wants me to go out and knock on doors. He wants me to go out and make cold calls to people. He wants me to buy a list of leads that I don't know who the people are. That's what he wants me to do. And this is a guy, he doesn't even have his own damn Facebook account. So how can I trust this guy with anything? He doesn't know anything about technology. So I had to really begin to look at it and say, wow, you know what? There's something to be said about having a formalized process for doing it, but a process that's fluid, that continues to evolve. And I think that has been the challenge with that, is that we're not saying, in this case, throw out everything that you've done. The old adage of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but it is to say that, you know what? The bathwater, the temperature has changed a bit. And so we got to turn up the heat and change the temperature, because at some time that water gets cold. And so we got to do something about that, brother. You know, or the baby's going to freeze. and there's a lot of frozen babies walking around.
Well, you said something, and I want you to expand on this.
Okay.
We're going into the training now,
Yes.
and the lack thereof, or archaic
Yes.
training that we have in this industry. You said something earlier that I want you to talk about a little bit. We're solving today's problems with yesterday's how.
Solving today's problems with yesterday's how. So think
Expand
about
on
that.
that.
So when I think about that, if I look at, in our space specifically, talking about advisory work, right? I realized that most of the training that I had previously was based upon selling and moving commodities. And so here was something that's different. I'm in the business of relationships. Nobody wakes up in the morning and just simply says, "Hey, I'm going to call Kareim because I need to get some health insurance." I mean, just hasn't happened to me in 20 years. Now, if it's happening to you guys out there, God bless you. Hasn't happened to me yet that somebody just wakes up and thinks about me. No, the difference is that I wake up and think about, how do I get in front of Andy and what value am I going to bring in that particular space? And so what I found is that I would come in and try to talk to Andy about things that were archaic. I'm coming and talking to Andy like I'm moving on this water bottle. And really what I'm talking about is a much more complex sale that I haven't even earned the right, because I haven't developed a relationship with Andy to do that. Now, if I'm just, everybody's going to buy water. So that's something that sells itself. What I'm talking about is developing a relationship and strategically changing what you're doing in your organization. And it's totally different. So when I've been told only how to sell water, then that does not compute or equate to moving over to relationship type of selling. And so I think what we're talking about now is that I can't take those old tactics of what I've used before and apply them to today's way of doing business, because it just doesn't work. And I have seen people trying to do that, Andy, and they're unsuccessful. And not only are they unsuccessful, they're frustrated as hell. And I think that that's what we're talking about, is how do we help move frustrated people who we have agreed can be the next leaders in our industry if we give them the right tool set. Now, they've got to do the work. You and I have always said that there's no substitute for the work. But how do we get those folks to a space where we at least can say to them, we gave you the tools that you needed, you had the opportunity, and either you had to pass or fail. I'm okay with
There's
that.
nothing that angers me more than to see a young advisor, it doesn't have to even be young, who is driven,
Yes,
but dejected, because nobody's helping them.
because nobody's helping.
And to your point, you said the commoditization, right? It's we're still practicing commodity selling in a relationship business.
Correct.
That's the part that blows me away.
You got to say that again. You got to say that.
We specialize in commodity selling in a relationship business.
In a relationship.
This is the part I find so funny. Kareim, you and I can agree insurance is a relationship business, right?
Yes.
Relationships are built on trust.
Yes.
But when I look at your agency, not you specifically, but when I look at your agency, your tactics are to go buy a huge list of leads of people who don't know who you are, and then you spam the hell out of them with cold calls and emails.
Right.
Yeah, this is a relationship business.
Yes, it's a relationship. And what's interesting about that, you and I were just joking about that, and I was telling you earlier, I'm like, so Andy, how does this work? Like, I get these people that want to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I say yes, and the next thing I know, they're like, well, hey, do you have 25 minutes to sit down with me? And I'm like, dude, can't even say that I met you. You just spammed me. I said okay, and now you're already pitching me. You're already selling me. And I'm like, we have no relationship. And why do you think that I would trust my 24 years of experience with my clients to somebody who just reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, man, you need to sell what I'm selling. You need to offer what I'm offering. In 25 minutes, I can show you how you can go from where you are today and you'll be a gazillionaire tomorrow. I'm like, come on, guys. I used to watch this on TV back late night. These used to be the late night commercials. You know, you want to live like this? This is what you do. And so I'm looking at this and saying, establishing a relationship, looking at things differently, agreeing that there's a different way about going about marketing, which is something that you're very strong in, right? And looking at how do you take that platform. And I think what we're saying is that people have just reverted back to, because I'm not willing to change as the leader, then I'm going to suggest that everybody does. And here's the other thing, and I'm guilty of this, because it's always worked for me this way, I don't need to shift for everyone else's growth. I'm just going to stay doing it this way. And this, even though this doesn't work for Andy, this doesn't work for not only just Andy, but Andy is my fifth Andy in the last couple months. And I've not taken time to take it back and assess myself to say, you know what, maybe you're the problem, Kareim.
Well, and you just brought up the biggest problem. We talk about wanting to move this industry forward in the right direction. To do that, we need good leadership.
Yes.
And that could be at the carrier level, that could be at NAHU level, that could be at the independent agency level.
Correct.
We need good leadership. And the problem is, you, Mr. Agency Owner, Miss Agency Owner, are frustrated because you can't find good people. And the reality is, it's because your next great leader just walked out the door because you didn't help them win.
Perfect. That's perfect. I can't sum it up any better than that. That's exactly what it is. Because there's no reason that you and I can leave there, go somewhere else and be very successful, same skill set, same everything, but someone in the leadership did not see what it is that we brought to the table and to give us what we need to have in order to be successful. So we always go back to the ROI, right? And looking and saying, okay, how much time, how much money did I invest in you for you to walk out the door in 3 or 4 months from now? That's ridiculous. So if I continue to repeat that, repeat on that particular cycle, then I keep on getting the same thing, which ultimately means to a number of things. One, I continue to get older. I continue to get longer in the tooth in the business. I don't have a succession plan. I don't have leaders. I don't have anyone following behind me because I haven't made the investment myself as the agency owner in how I'm going to begin to shift my mindset, which means ultimately people will want to follow because I cannot attract. I can't go hunting for the same thing I used to hunt for with the same tools that I used to hunt with before. It's just impossible, right? The game has changed. They're faster. Their attention span is, is just shorter. And so now I'm trying to go out and tell you, hook you in and say, hey, Andy, come on in, man. You can pick up on the phone, but where the last guy just left off. Let's see how that works out. And it doesn't work, man. So we've got to look at mind shift changing from the agency level that then will be trickled down there because it starts with us as agency owners.
However,
Tim?
Advisors are not guilt-free.
Hell no.
Because you said something this morning offline that I thought was genius. And you and I obviously are going to be using a lot of sports analogies here. But it's like we've had this version of the transfer portal in the insurance industry.
Yes.
And if you think about the transfer portal in college today, it's become obnoxious because I go to the school, I was recruited to the school, I didn't win the job, so instead of getting better to compete to win that job, I pout, and then I go transfer to another school, and then I don't win the job again, so I transfer again. You got these kids transferring 2-3 times. Yet they never changed.
And it's the same thing with producers, right?
Yes.
So I can look at a producer and people that I see out in the community, and I've got 3-4 business cards from you in the last 16, 18 months, though. This is not over the course of your 20, 30-year career that you've chosen. So I'm all for it. If new opportunity comes up, presents itself, it's a better fit, great. But just simply moving to move because you're chasing something that's going to be perfect, there is nothing perfect, right? And then more importantly, what have I done to grow as the advisor? I cannot offload this simply on the agency. Now, we're stating that there's a place that they play in terms of giving me my trainings, things along those lines. But there's also enough stuff out there today, too, for an advisor to invest in him or herself. Mm-hmm. And they have to do that as well, because if you want to be successful, the only person you can bet on is you, Andy. I mean, you can't, I can't come to you and say, Andy, teach me everything. God forbid Andy gets hit by a bus. God forbid Andy's out of business. So I can't put all my eggs into that basket. But what I am going to do is that I'm going to make sure that I'm continuing to grow as an advisor, that I'm continuing to learn and change my own perspective, because we all know, you and I talk about this all the time, it's really mindset, man. There's no scarcity in this business. There's plenty of people. Every time I look up, there's another. We just saw record growth of new businesses open up, so that means there's opportunities, right? No opportunities, not from a shortage of opportunity. It's just simply looking at who's going to work on their game. Who's going to do all the stuff?
And that's, I think, the message we want to get across is yes, we're talking about a lack of training right now, but again, the producers aren't free from this guilt, right? Because I know when I look back, Kareem, for the first 10 years of my career, I was a shitty advisor. Like I was bad because I didn't take responsibility. I blamed my market. I blamed my territory. I blamed whatever. I blamed all these stupid reasons why I wasn't winning. And I remember when Amy and I moved out here to Colorado, that's when I first started going into self-development. And I remember at Oak Bell, I bought my first online course, Darren Hardy's Insane Productivity. And that was the first form of investment I ever made on my own growth.
Come on now.
And I look back, that was 8 years ago. Do you know how much in the time I was advising for another company where I was not the owner, do you know how much money I have spent on self-development and how much of it I've asked for my company to pay for?
Bingo.
None.
Bingo.
So
Bingo.
For the advisors listening in, thinking it's your employers, we're gonna talk about employers. You need to be training better.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
But if I'm an advisor and you think it is the job of your employer, you're wrong.
You got to rethink that.
You're not working hard enough.
No.
You're not committed enough.
No.
If you're not willing to put your own skin in the game.
Correct.
To go make it successful.
Because let's face it, anytime that we've seen people go on to be successful, they got skin in the game. And anytime I've seen somebody give something away for free, no one appreciates it the same way when it's given away for free. So even when we talk about from an advising standpoint, we know when we start talking about training and advising, you go out and you just vomit on your prospective client and you tell them everything about everything you do. And now they're like, oh, hell, I don't need to talk to you any longer. You've already given me everything that I need to have, which means that I don't need to work with you for right. I'm going to take this to my current broker and give them everything that you need to have. So my thought process, right, is that as an individual, I spent more money. So while people were going out and they were chasing all kind of things out there, whether they were chasing the next market, to your point of saying it's a new market, it's a new area, I'm going to move over here. I just started saying, man, this is an inside job. And in the inside job, I got to start working on me because the way that I'm thinking about it is how I'm approaching it. And because I'm approaching it that way, I'm getting the same results. But then I'm looking at the people around the water cooler that I'm talking to. They're all complaining about the same shit that I'm complaining about. So we're all in this same foxhole together. Nobody's happy. Nobody's helping us to move. But the somebody that we should be looking at is right here. And we haven't taken any time. And so once I got that and I understood that it was more of an inside job, I remember having a mentor tell me, he said, do you realize of the 1,800 some odd insurance companies that are out there, there's somebody that's top of the table at every one of those damn insurance companies every single year. And it's companies that you've never heard of. It's products that you've never seen. And yet somebody's out there selling that shit every single day. And I had to think about that and think, like, wow, so you're out in rural wherever and you're top of the table and you're making, how do you explain that? Because it doesn't seem like the market was right? Doesn't seem like there's the right products. I can make all those excuses of being out there. But they're very successful. But the folks that I started realizing that had the most success with the folks that were working on themselves. And so that's what we're talking about, is that in this shift and change of our thought process, it's got to start with us, man. It's got to start with us. There's no excuse around it.
Well, absolutely. And, if you go look at anybody who's having success in this industry right now, and you ask them, there's two things you got to consider. Number one, how much time and money have they spent on investing on themselves?
Correct.
The answer is a lot.
Yes.
But this is where I find it. I still get it. I'm sure you get it too. Just yesterday, I had somebody reach out and ask to pick my brain. And when you say that to somebody, I want people to listen to this. When you say that to somebody, I know you're coming at it with the right intention, but what you're asking that person is, Kareem, I want you to take all the years you've spent on money and time and getting your ass kicked that you have gleaned, and I want you to give it to me
for free. For free. Come on, man. I mean, where do they do that? Where that makes sense? Because here's the problem. I'm never going to get anything. I'm always reminded of when there's a wealth transfer situation. Someone who's gone out and built a business and been very successful, and they pass it on to the kids who not have to work for anything. And they look up and 2 or 3 years later, the business has imploded, everything is gone because those kids never had a vested interest.
That's why businesses barely last, what, second, third generation?
Yeah, there's no vested interest. So you came in and skimmed all the goodness off the top. You enjoyed all the lifestyle, nothing to actually build it. And so it's the same thing when I look at advisors. I'm looking at advisors and they're talking to me and saying, wow, we're seeing you doing this. And I'm like, well, this ain't about me, but did you see me 24 years ago? When I was hiding my car in the garage because they were going to repo it. I was moving mortgage payments behind, and I was taking it and saying, well, I need to invest in this conference. I need to read this book. I need to build something with me because I knew that it was an inside job. When I first left, I think I shared this with you before, when I came out of teaching and went back into the insurance business, I took all the money I had to go fly out to an agency in California to see the Bob Blake agency out in California. And I just wanted to see, because I had been reading at that time, it wasn't online, I was reading articles and journals. They would send out the newsletter from Colonial, and I would read, and I'm saying, damn, these guys are top of the table. They're always doing it. So I wanted to go see what they were doing. I took every dime I had, and at the time I was married, took every dime I had, and I remember ex-wife kind of looking at me crazy and saying, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, I need to just go out here and see it. But I was willing to take all that came along with that, because I needed to go see what success looked like, what it smelled like, what it felt like. And this agency, at least through these articles, they had it. But the point was that I had to invest. I had to invest the money in a flight to go out, had to invest in a hotel to be there, in a rental car for food, and money I did not have. So am I telling somebody, go out and take all the dollars you have and go? No, what I'm saying is I was so committed to the process. I was so committed, and I was not willing at that point to leave that commitment in somebody else's hands. I own my commitment. And I think that that's what I'm talking about, is that people who own their own commitment, I was going to be successful whether the agency owner helped me become successful or not, because I made a decision that I was going to be successful. I was going to listen to enough. I was going to read enough. I was going to see enough that would allow me to be successful in that same agency where maybe that person had not. Because I realized at that point, and maybe it wasn't the agency. Maybe it wasn't the agency. Because there were some places that were some good places for me. But I just wasn't ready mentally to lock in and load and be committed to the process. And I watch too many advisors that want to come in, especially now, that just want to come in. And it just happens overnight. And as I told you earlier, I said at the end of the day, I'd have a little bit of attitude, Andy, if somebody came in and what it's taken me to do in 24 years, they did it in 2. And that's not to say they're not a superstar. Go do it. But I just know what it takes inside here in order to get you there.
Well, and that leads to a shit cocktail.
Yes.
You talked about the fact we are teaching commodity selling in a relationship business, but then we apply a very short-term mentality to it. It gets even worse. I mean, the amount of what I call desperation selling going on right now is off the charts because, again, you're not teaching. These are men and women who have not been taught how to do it, right?
Correct.
Let's be very honest about something.
Correct.
There is a low bar to entry to the insurance industry.
There is.
It's just a case.
Can you get licensed?
Can you pass a test?
Can you pass the test? Can you get licensed? That's it.
And so these folks come in, no training, very little training, or outdated training. They're being taught how to sell like a commodity when it's a relationship business, but then they've got to create results tomorrow.
Correct.
And what happens is now they're searching, they're chasing. And I see it all the time from the coaching and consulting perspective. How many people just want the next silver bullet?
Correct. You and I were talking about this earlier, and it's crazy. And I was sharing with you how I was speaking with a speaker, a national speaker, who was talking about just the things that they do and how they go and speak. And at the end, if there's products and services, books and CDs or whatever it is that they were selling at this time.
Back of the room sales, baby.
Back of the room sales, right? And you're looking at this deal, and I remember him telling me 87% of the people never opened the materials after they purchased them. And so you're chasing the silver bullet, and you keep looking and you're going after this one and this one. The shit works if you work it, right? So if I take this and I'm just going to invest this for the sake of saying that I invested, but I'm not going to sit down and actually do the work, then there's nothing to talk about. I can't be mad at the speaker because he or she has delivered what they said that they were going to do. But the end user, that's where the error is at. It's a user error, you know? And I think that a lot of times we don't want to accept the fact that's a user error. That most people are looking for you as my coach. Even if I'm hiring you as my coach, Andy, I mean, and you got to talk about this as we talked about this earlier. But I'm expecting something that's going to miraculously happen from you. And you told me, share what you said before about when they asked you why wouldn't this work, and what was your result?
Yeah, I was on a call just the other day with an agency, and they're looking at one of our programs,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked a very legit question. Give us like examples, like who has success with the program and who doesn't. And I said, I'm going to give you the answer you don't want to hear because it's the most boring answer, but it's the right answer. The people who take what I teach them and actually do it have success. The people who don't because they're trying to be perfect, they're trying to do this and that, or they're distracted, they're not disciplined, will not. It's that simple.
Simple.
I'm not giving you some ROI. I'm not giving you no. This shit works if you do the work.
Do the work. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine. So I look at that and I think about it. I was just looking at something on one of the news networks the other day, and they were talking about obesity in teens. And so now they've come out with a pill, and they're like, you know what, it's a pill for obesity for teens. And I'm thinking like, well, wait a minute. When I was in grade school, I mean, we went outside for rec, and we played sports, and I rode my bike, and we played baseball, and we did a lot of things that were active that allowed us to stay in shape at that point. Now, granted, there's some challenges. Nowhere am I coming against folks that there's obesity problems. I'm just saying that we're still pushing a pill, something that does not require work, as opposed to saying, hey, well, what do we do if we look at the diet differently? What do we do if we incorporate some exercise? What do we do if we drink some water? What do we do? What are, because not all these things require me to take ownership and do something, and yet it's not the silver bullet. So when I find people chasing all of these different ideas, I refer to it as the idea of the month club. I mean, that's my deal. The damn idea, what's the freshest idea? Oh, well now Andy's talking about this. Oh, well now Kareim is talking about this. Oh, well, and you're chasing it, and you've never done any of those things. Here's what we know about success, Andy, it's universal. The principles are the same. So now, are there different tactics and strategies which you and I talk about? Yeah. But the idea of how success comes and unfolds, it's universal, man. It doesn't change, bro.
Well, and the pill for obesity is no different than, Kareem, just give me the perfect cold call and email script.
The script.
That's all I need to grow my business.
The Glenn Ross leads. I
remember Gary Vee, watching a Gary Vee keynote, and he got up on stage, and he teaches, he's really trying to encourage these people that they have to start creating content. And most of his keynote talks about, you guys have to start creating content. What else do I have to say to get you to start doing content?
Right.
But what he said is, if I were up here, and this was a fitness conference, and I was up here, you asked me to get up as a keynote speaker to help teach you how to lose weight, I'm going to look at you and say, exercise and eat better.
That's it.
But none of you want to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear the truth. You can't handle the
This
truth.
shit works if you do the work.
You do the work.
And you got to invest in yourself. And
You got it. So, and I mean, before we move, I just want to talk about this investment thing, right? Like the majority of, I'll hear someone share with me, oh, well, I went and invested in this, or I invested, and I'm like, if you haven't invested in you, this was the best investment that I ever made. Was what was I doing with me, right? And it wasn't about a product. It wasn't about some nifty little thing, some little trick, it was simply on how have I grown? How have I grown? Because the way that I saw things, you and I were talking about this earlier, and in our industry, there's this scarcity mentality, right? There's this, the competitors are going to get, and that's all nonsense. There's enough business for all of us. Not to even count the amount of cases that they don't even have an advisor broker attached to them, right? They're working directly with a carrier or someone. So there's plenty of business for us to get. But our mentality and how we think about that, if as an agency owner, I think that there's scarcity, what do you think that I train on? I train on scarcity.
we're going to talk about that. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal, man. And so I think about just getting my head together. I'll tell you, I don't know if I shared this with you before, Andy, but I remember when I really started working on myself, I remember getting in the mirror, and I would literally get in the mirror and I would role play. I would look at what my hand gestures look like, what my facial gestures look like. I mean, I just really got into this whole deal of, I understood that if I look at actors and actresses, those that make a lot of money are the ones that practice the most, right? They're the best at their craft. They make me believe that they are whoever it is that they're acting, right? And so I had to look at the same thing and say, well, damn, if that works for them, how much better would I be if folks believed that I was the advisor that I said that I am? And I think so many people are walking around stating that they're this type of advisor, but yet when you look at the work that they do or lack there of work that they do, you realize real quick that they're not. And so the investment that I made in me when I got in that mirror, when I talked to myself, when I had those notes, when I was studying, I was looking at how do I get better? Because at that point, hey, I can take the skill set that I've developed and I can apply it to any business model. It's not just specifically to the insurance industry, right? It's a mindset of how do I think about things in advance and what do I attract in that process? Because people know it. We understand that. You and I connected because we saw there was opportunity. You and I talking about business, but then we just connected like minds. We felt the different energy. It was something a different, because I don't connect with everybody. You don't connect with everybody like that. And that's okay. Everybody's not going to like, we're loud, we're gregarious, we're going to have fun, we're going to do all kind of crazy things that somebody else is like, oh my God, that's way too much to have to listen to those guys going on. But I understood who I was, the authenticity of that, and it came from investment. It came from books. It came from seminars. It came from, at that time, I'm dating myself, tapes and CDs. And now it comes from YouTube videos, right? That I'm spending the time. I remember you talking about that. Maybe you should talk about this just from just what your morning get up looks like and what time you get started and what you're doing top of the morning. Because I think, again, that we all have looked at it and said, okay, Andy Neary, and it looks as though Andy Neary just bubbled up to the top of what was going on in the industry. And I know better because I remember when you started this thing, but I know also behind the scenes, the work that you do. So just maybe talk quickly about what.
Yeah, no, I think there's people out there that would look at what I'm doing today and they're skeptical. And here's why I'll say that. Are there people in the industry, Kareem, who have had a lot more success than I've had when it comes to selling an insurance product?
Correct.
That.
Okay.
Absolutely. I was not the best insurance rep from a sales perspective. I'm willing to admit that. So there's probably people who look at me right now with skepticism, like, what's he doing? But to your point, when I realized what my gift was, which was not selling insurance, it was getting attention through the channel of marketing, which opens doors.
Correct.
I've always said, I say this very clearly today, it's why my business exists. Had I been a better closer, I'd be sitting on an $8 million book right now with my ability to get attention, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. But I saw what my gift was. However, to your point, I'm where I'm at with that gift because every morning at 4:30, 4:45, I'm up, and one of the first things I am doing every single day is digesting YouTube content. Now, not the bullshit of watching some kid play video games.
Correct.
Education.
Yes.
If you cannot understand, you the listener, that YouTube is the greatest library, free library we've ever had, you're missing the point. I have probably consumed more than 500 hours of marketing content in the last 5 years.
Wow.
I'm probably being conservatively low.
So if I had to equate that to professional designations or degrees, I could say that you have a PhD in marketing.
I'm getting, and I don't want to say that to say that I'm an expert. By no means. No, we're never an expert, point. Right?
No.
To your point, what makes somebody successful at what they do?
Yes.
They're putting in the work when no one's watching.
Practice.
That's simple. Why was I able to play professional baseball? It's all the work I did when no one was watching.
Practice. So what you've said to me, as we both realize, people are better than us.
Absolutely.
People have just better skill set right off top.
There's always going to be somebody more knowledgeable and talented than you.
Yes. However, we're willing to do the work
Exactly.
that other people aren't willing to do.
Yeah.
Man, that's good, bro.
Let's talk about the second issue we see. So we're talking about leadership. We need to develop better leaders. One thing you and I agree on is that the definition of a leader in the insurance industry is slightly off right now. Talk about that.
Yeah. I think that when we look at leaders, what we have done in our industry is to say that, you know what, Andy, you knocked the ball out the park last year with your numbers. Fantastic. You've been here 3 years. You're our top guy here. You know what? We think you're ready for management. And Andy says, great. So, mindly, we got to be mindful of the fact of, hold on now. Andy's been great at sales. We've never talked to him about any leadership. We never watched him train anybody. We just said, you've been here 3 years. You've got the best numbers. You're knocking the ball out the park. So we automatically do what? We promote you. And we say, well, here's our next leader. So let's talk a bit about that. What you've seen in that space, how effective and efficient that is, or lack thereof being effective and efficient.
Yeah, I'm going to start where my career started. I started with an insurance company that is well known, I don't know if they still are, but was well known for how they train their producers.
Okay.
And I sold everything, property casualty, benefits, disability, life insurance, you name it. And the way you got promoted there to district manager was through your sales success, right? And what would happen is, these districts there are made up of 8 producers. They call them marketing reps, 8 producers. And what I would see happen is these men and women come from college. They come out of college, go through their 9-month training program. They come out and they have like 2 great years coming out.
Right.
25 years old. Because of that sales success, they're now promoted to district manager. So here now you have a 25-year-old kid. I'm going to say kid because you're brand new to the industry.
Yeah.
Managing a district where you might have 10, 15-year veterans who have been successful. And they come in and they think they're going to run the place.
Mm-hmm.
And within a matter of a year or two, that district is a complete dumpster fire. Maybe your best producers are now flipping to the independent side, working for an independent agency. Maybe they went off and started their own.
Right.
But it's because that company's whole promotion philosophy is sales success.
Right. So when we think about that, and we think about defining leaders in our space today, then we're saying that that's a flawed model. That model has it's not sustainable.
Says nothing about the person's leadership ability.
Correct. And so the other thing that you and I were talking about offline is that I think we miss the opportunities as agency owners, and I've been guilty. So everything we're talking about today, these aren't things that I'm just pulling out my ass. These are things from being an agency owner for years. I've tried, I've been successful with some, and I have missed it on a lot. But what we've done is that we've promoted folks that way, and we've failed to look within the other rank and file, whether it's account manager, whether it's account executives, whether it's somebody that may not even be in the sales role, to look at, could that potentially be the next leader? Because just as you're saying right now, you weren't the top in sales. I never was the top in sales. I was always great at managing people, though. And so I could take folks to the next level, and our team was great. But I had people that would always outsell me because I just wasn't going to go after it that they went after it. I wasn't going to be relentless. I was going to do it to a point. But Andy, there were some people out there that were psycho, bro, that I was just like, oh, I can't do it. But I could lead people. And so when someone recognized the fact that, oh, he might not be the top in sales. He's done well in sales, but he's got this other cerebral thing going on where he can get people to move. He can motivate people to go. He can train in this deal. It changed the whole deal. So when you and I were talking about that, I was thinking back to myself and thinking at the times when I first moved into the sales manager role, I did exactly what I stated earlier. Get in the car with me, come roll, let me see what we can do.
Just do it the way I did.
Just do it the way I did. Yeah. And man, people are looking at me like, wait a minute, first of all, I'm not that loud, I'm not that gregarious, I'm not gonna be all over the place. You're spitting the slob. That's just not my deal. You're scaring me with your tactics, right? And I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to do differently now? And then I started looking at the strengths of the folks that I was with. So now going to a leadership role, I had to take off my hat of being the top salesperson, which in many cases, when you've been the top salesperson and now we promote you and you've got your own book of business, what happens then, Andy? Because what do you want to focus on at that point? If you've been top of the table and that's what you know to do, you've never had to be worried about anybody else beneath you, and you're going at this game, what do you do at that point, Andy? Because I'm thinking that most cases and most of the reps that I know that were good like that, guess what they stay focused on? Their book of business.
Well, and you and I were talking about that too, right? Like, there are still agencies out there, which this part blows me away. A producer who's been elevated to the role of sales manager, sales director, still has their own book.
Yes.
How are you going to expect that person to run a team when they still have their own goals of their own book in mind? There's no way. There's no human.
Right.
You and I included.
Yes.
That is not going to put more effort into your own wins than you are the team, your team's wins, right?
No question.
Now, this goes back to what we're getting at here is the philosophy that we see in the insurance industry is if you can sell, therefore, you must be a good leader. Let's apply this to the sports world. Should not the Charlotte Hornets have won 7 NBA titles right now? Because Michael Jordan's the owner.
I would think
He's
so.
the greatest ever.
I would think so.
The best owner.
I would think so. I would think that every player would want to go play for the GOAT. I just think that. I would think that's that. And so it's the same thing if I look at that, right? And I'm thinking about it from our industry, and I look at a top salesperson, and a top sales. I'm going to go out on the limb to tell you that I'm going to say maybe I've seen it work 20% of the time. The number is very low in terms of effective sales managers and leaders who are the top of their team in sales. I see a very low conversion rate because when it's always been about you and you've been the one going to getting the points, you've been the one, that's what drives. And I'm not upset about that at all. I applaud you. However, the people that you're going to look to train or that are going to look to follow you, they can't follow you.
Well, and I want to spin a silver lining on this. If you are a producer out there listening to this, and you're not the top sales rep, that does not mean you don't have leadership capabilities.
Exactly.
I want you to know that I gave you the example. I failed at my first insurance company because I could not sell life insurance.
Right.
I sucked at selling life insurance. And I remember when I left, because I left on my own terms, but had I not left, had it not gone on my own terms, they were going to tell me to leave. They were going to fire me.
The gig is up, man.
And so I went to the independent side, and I remember the day I got a call back from them and said, listen, we've never done this before, but we have a position open for like the regional director, I forget the name of it, regional manager of our group health division. We have the guy or woman who runs the group health stuff for who goes out and does the ride-alongs, the producers.
Yes.
We're considering hiring. We've never done this because we actually let you go. Like you failed here.
Yes.
But we saw something in you.
Come on.
Now, I ultimately did not take it, but that was a sign for me that said, you know what? Even though my numbers didn't say that I deserved a promotion or an advancement into leadership, they saw something in me.
And I think from an agency owner standpoint, a principal in an agency being able to recognize that.
And it might be one of your account execs and account managers.
Exactly. And I think that we miss that because we're so much, again, driven by the numbers and driven by profitability. And we fail to realize that in profitability and in numbers, if we've got the right people in the right places, that continues to grow and sustains it. And so if I get the hotshot salesperson who's been fantastic, but yet they're a cancer to my organization, they actually kill profitability.
Oh. Kareem, I still see this today. How many producers who have success because they can sell,
yes,
but are an absolute cancer to the culture of the organization, and what does the agency management team do? They go put them in the corner, and they say, yeah, we're not going to have any of our team work with them because they're jerks. But
yes.
We don't want to lose that revenue.
No.
So we're just going to let them continue, letting that cancer continue to infect this office.
Yes.
But they're just going to sit on their own island. They don't even include them in sales meetings.
Yeah. Now, think about how crazy that is. And think about the messaging, though, that's being sent down to other producers. When we see that, we know this guy's an asshole. We know he's a jerk. We know he's bad for the culture in our organization. But because we're not willing to give up the revenue, we'll still just kind of put him in his corner. And so now what it looks like, though, is that he has preferential treatment, right? I mean, you're getting the reverse of. So now what I'm saying and what I'm looking at when I see something like that is that I'm rewarding bad behavior.
Bingo. And I think what we're getting at is, again, if it was true that the definition of a good leader is someone who had sales success, that should equate to people like Michael Jordan being the greatest coaches, owners ever, right?
No question.
Flip side. Kareem, who's the greatest, odds-on greatest coach in the NFL ever?
I'm going to say Bill Belichick.
If he's not, he's in the top 3.
Yeah.
How about college football?
I'm going to say Nick Saban.
Nick Saban, right?
Yeah.
Where did Bill Belichick play college football?
Shit.
I don't know. Did he play in the NFL? No, he didn't.
Yeah.
Now, I'm one of the odd ducks who probably know that Nick Saban played D-back at Kent State.
Yeah, you're out with that. Because I had no clue.
But that's because I read his autobiography. But they didn't play in the NFL.
Come on, man.
They weren't 5-star recruits.
Come on now.
But they're amazing leaders.
But they're amazing leaders. And that's what we've got to be thinking about when we're looking at principal and agency management. And we, again, a flawed old way of thinking, trying to solve for the how with old ways of doing things, brother. And there's no way. No way.
We're going to get in now to the last thing we want to talk about before we talk about what's the fix.
Yes.
Lack of diversity in this industry. Now, we know exactly where everybody's going right now the second I said that, but we're not talking about color, race, sex. We know there's a lack of diversity.
Yes.
We know there's not enough African Americans, Hispanics, women in this industry.
Period.
It is, I'm going to say it, and people are going to hate me for it, it is still male, stale, and pale.
Correct. All day long.
We're talking about a lack of diversity of thought.
Yes.
Talk about that.
That is a different way of approaching things, Andy. The lack of diversity of thought. When we start thinking about the fact that we've got the same thought process that we've used from 25 years ago, we're still continuing to push that down into the organization, and we got everybody thinking the same way as us. We lose the diversity of thought that comes from having other people outside, new, fresh ideas coming to the table. And I think from our standpoint, what we've done as agency owners is to simply state, if you want those things to happen, Andy, in your business, you need to go open up your own shop. We're not even open to listening to the diversity of thought because we've done it this way all the time. I'm successful because of X, Y, and Z. And what I'm saying is that, and I think you and I are both saying, the lack of diversity of thought is detrimental to the growth of an agency.
You know, it's funny, you just made me realize something. I've had a lot of conversations in the last couple of years since starting Complete Game Consulting where I'll have an advisor, I'm talking to an advisor, and truth be told, once in a while it's my own clients.
Yeah.
And he or she is frustrated because they're trying these different things with prospecting and they're getting pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And how many, you know, I can't tell you how many times in my conversation with them, in private, right, on a phone call or Zoom chat, I'm going, you're doing all the right things.
Right.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Right.
You're doing all the right things. And it's frustrating because what's happening is they are setting themselves up to win today. But at the agency management level, they're getting pushback because it doesn't look like what it looked like 10, 15, 20 years ago.
So you and I were talking, and I'll talk about my own experience in this space on diversity of thought, is that 10 years ago, I brought in an agent who now serves in a Rob Hartman, and I brought in Rob, and I always say that Rob's arguably one of the smartest guys that I know. And so, one, he didn't have any background in the healthcare industry. So the first thing is that he had a whole different perspective and viewpoint. He came from the financial services industry, specifically Series 7 and that whole thing. The smart people stuff, the stuff that I can't do. You know, that's the smart people stuff. And so what he said to me about that business was that he knew where everything was. It was transparent. He knew everything about it. He said, this is the most non-transparent business that I've ever seen, that you're telling me that people go get services without ever knowing what it's going to cost them until actually they receive the bill. He said, they're stealing. Like, this is ridiculous. So his logical mind was there. When he came to me, diversity of thought, and said to me, was like, well, Kareem, what are you doing? I'm like, well, we spreadsheet these deals and we say, hey, here's the best. Here's the best of the three evils. This one is 4%. This one's 8%, 12%. You choose, and next year we'll see you and we'll go through the same thing again. And he said, really? He said, have you ever thought about looking at the economics of healthcare? And I'm like, the hell are you talking about? The economics? No, I do a spreadsheet. This deal works out. They pick and choose. It's amazing, man. You just put it in front of them. You say, here's the deal. And we see them again next year. We don't even have to see them that often. He said, well, I want you to talk about supply chain. Have you thought about, do you know the unit cost of healthcare? Because you need to understand these types of things if you're going out in your position. You're telling me that you're going to help people save money. You're going to do all these type of things. Have you ever looked at these? I'm like, no, I've never looked at any of those things. Here's where the difference was. I was open to the fact that a diverse thought came to the table.
By the way, what year was this?
This was 10 years ago, man.
We're just starting to talk about this stuff in the last 5 years. You guys were doing this for a decade.
For a decade, and people were looking at me like I was crazy because at that point I had to make a decision. He provided new information that had me to have a change in thought of how I was approaching things because There was no diversity in what I was doing the same thing as everybody else. And when I looked at it, I'm like, wow, okay, let's think about this. Is there a different way at going at the same process and getting a different result? Because I was getting the same results as everyone else, yet the clients on the other end were constantly telling me about the same problem, which is where we can't contain the cost. We've gone up. We've doubled this over the last 5 years. It's gone up 3-4 times. And I'm saying, okay, well, here was the first person that came to me and said, well, it's an economic issue. It's a supply chain issue. It's a unit issue. Have you ever talked to your clients about any of these things? Do they even understand these things? I'm like, hell no, because I don't understand what the hell you're talking about myself. But the point was that I was open. I was open. And I didn't say, well, you got no business telling me about my industry. You don't know shit about this. What I said was, okay, walk me through, why do you see it this way? Because he had a different way of looking. He wasn't close to the action. He wasn't in the game. It had nothing to do with revenue for him. It wasn't going to be, if we start going this way, we're going to lose our bonuses from these organizations over here. It was simply stating that there's another way for you to approach this business. And if you're open to it, I really like to think that this is the way things are going to go. So as your point, 10 years ago, we were having that conversation where no one else was having that conversation. Our website was talking about that stuff back then, and people thought we were loony. They thought we were crazy, that we lost it. They're looking at me and saying, Kareem, how do you even want to say? Because you know what it did then? We had to slow down in order to speed up, and we were already going fast. And so most leaders, you don't want to slow down to speed up. But we were thinking about what you just said. I wasn't thinking about today. I was thinking about, okay, if what he's saying is accurate, we've got to look 5 years down the road, 7 years down the road, sustainability. So that's one of the things that you and I talked about is what's sustainable. So when I look at that diversity of thought and changing from when we look at true diversity, we did this black and white thing because we knew it would get a rise, we could get a kick, we'd have a great time with it because the automatic assumption is that's what we're going to talk about. Well, this is obvious. We can see that we're black and white. We can see that I have no hair, you have hair. We know there's a whole lot of diverse things that we have going on here. Your tan is about the same as mine, and we're about the same. In the winter, I'm going to be...
I live in Colorado, man. It's easy to get tan.
I'm trying to get there. In Michigan, I just started to fade, and
you guys haven't seen the sun in 33 days.
No, it's not happening. So I just think that diversity in thought is different. And so when I think about agency owners who bring in new people, but yet they squelch the ideas that those new people bring in because it's not the way that we've done it. It's not the way that I've been successful. You and I talked about the same thing. I'm sure that someone came to the leadership of Blockbuster and said, you know what? There's something new that's going to happen here. And if we're smart, we want to be on the front of it. And they said, no, everybody wants to keep coming to the store, dropping off videos in a little shoe, coming in and renting.
Hey, money's coming in. We don't have to change.
We're rolling. We're rolling. And if you ever read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? And then the cheese disappeared, right? You're a Wisconsin guy, so you know about cheese.
So I can't have it anymore.
You can't have it anymore.
Oh,
my goodness. But you know about it, though. You're a cheesehead. You're actually a cheesehead, too. I forgot about it. You're a cheesehead. So you think about that, though, and you think about that process, man. Diversity of thought changes revenue cycle, man. It does, because you started bringing in people. Bringing in one person changed the whole trajectory of our agency because I was open to the fact that I might be wrong and still doing things an old-fashioned way.
Well, it made me think of something. I mean, Kareem, I don't think there's a better definition of failure in our industry than shoving an idea down your agency's throat because it's your idea.
Yes.
I should say this a different way. Shoving a bad idea down your agency's throat because it's your idea.
Right.
And by the way, if you're listening, this applies as much to the big carriers.
Yes.
And all the big industry partners we have, as much as it does the independent agency.
Correct.
In fact, I'd say the bigger you are, the more this applies because you have more leadership roles. You're always looking for future leaders. And again, these problems are everywhere in this industry. And right. What you made me realize is I go back to the agencies I worked at. And the reason I eventually became unemployable, and I had to start my own thing to help people do this, is I remember being at these agencies and two things would happen. Either my ideas would get suppressed.
Yes.
We don't do that here.
Yes.
Or they'd let me do them. But then the culture, the philosophy in the office was, oh, that's what Andy does. We don't do it that way.
Mm. Mm.
And that's when I realized, like, I can't find an agency right now that is going to let me try, test, and run my marketing strategy that I know works for today because we're still proud of how we sold 30 years ago.
Correct. Correct. And to me, that is a principal agency issue. So when we start talking about, we're watching right now all the mergers and acquisitions taking place, right? Our industry, people are selling out left and right. And what you and I have agreed upon is in many cases, it's because they have not made a decision to shift or change the way that they think. And so the easy way out at that point is to simply say, well, shit, I'll sell. And they sell only to realize that in me selling and going to this new model, I've given up my creativity. And of course, all the large agencies are always going to tell us about their resources. Oh, well, I mean, right now you got to do this, and we've got a marketing team, and we got this, and we got that. Never talking about the freedom that you give up from the autonomy that you have, right? And so now we've got these agency owners. Did they really want to go work for? If you've been an agency owner for 30 years, Andy, and you got to earn out for 3 years, and you got to go work for somebody for 3 years, I'm like you, I'm unemployable. And so now I know that my revenue is tied to these next 3 years, for which will be hard for me, Andy. I gotta be silent, man. I just gotta go along with the flow. And that's a problem. So if I looked at how I shifted and changed, and you and I were talking about this even with my agency, I had multiple people trying to come out and purchase it. And I really had to sit back and think and said, okay, one, is this what I want to do? But more importantly than that, is this a financial issue? Is this a succession issue? And I'm going to be willing to say that in most of those agencies that are selling, they've got cash flows. They've got money flowing through there. They don't have a succession plan because they haven't brought up any additional leaders. And they're still trying to run it like 1987. And the 2022 agent is saying, yeah, I'm not with that. I'm not going to do that. There's got to be a better way, and being open to that. So the diversity of thought thing for me is in my agency, there's a core group of insiders. This way, I'm going to call it my C-suite team, right? And in that team, what I share with you, Andy, is that I have one vote. I have one vote in that. Now, I maintain the ability to veto any idea that doesn't make sense, right? And it doesn't make sense. I'm saying it doesn't make sense based upon additional information that maybe the team does not have that I have, that I'll share with them and say, okay, well, let me introduce this to the table to say this is why we might not want to go that way. Other than that, the power in our growth and our trajectory over the years is that I listen and hear out all of the other thoughts that are at the table. Because if there's just one way of thinking, why do I need them? Right? If it's always going to be my way and there's no other way to do it, why do I have an internal team at all? Because I'm just spewing out to them what it is that I think. Part of me having an internal team and having that cabinet is diversity of thought, right?
Yep.
They think about, they came with a different discipline. Rob, as I told you, Rob has a degree in Italian Renaissance and African American history, right? And then he has economics. I don't have that. You know what I mean? I just got out of school. I smoked a lot of weed. I drank a lot. I had a great time. My story is totally different than everybody else's. I'm like,
this is no longer a PG.
I had a great time. I'm in Denver though, so it's perfect.
I mean, to your point, and I want to be realistic, I've never had the fortune and opportunity to sell an agency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of peers who have and have had a lot of success.
Yes.
And they've sold on their terms.
Yes.
Everything's been great. But what your point and kind of where the hell are we going with all this is, by and large, I see too many agencies selling on someone else's terms.
Yes.
Because they're burnt out and they don't have a succession plan. And part of the reason they're at that point is they don't know how to grow anymore. And the reason they're not growing is because they have not invested the time to train and influence their future leaders in their agency.
Correct.
It's a trickle-down effect.
Correct.
And your next greatest leader, the one that's going to take your agency, one, persist it, perpetuate it, and take it to the next level, just walked out the door to the competitor because you did nothing to help them have success. That's the name of the game.
I will tell you that one of the things that Rob and I talk about regularly is the fact that he would be sharp for any corporate gig, right? Because he's just a brainiac, genius kind of guy and very good at what he does. However, what he understood was that he could come up with all of the ideas, all the ideation that he wants to have in that space, but the chances of them being implemented were slim to none. The difference was that he was working with a leader in myself that was open to the fact of saying, okay, let's see what that looks like. I'm willing to try that because I know what I have already tried. I know what hasn't worked, right? And if I'm going to go back to the playbook and say that all I'm going to do is burn and churn the same ideas over and over again, am I open to the fact that looking at this from a different vantage point and different perspective would make sense for the growth of the business? So what Rob found and fell in love with was the fact that he could bring an idea. I'd look at it, the team would discuss it, and we could go and implement something like that. So now his value, his diversity of thought, being on the outside looking in, changed the trajectory of where we were going. But I had to be open to the fact that because he had not been in my, because normally what we're going to say, you've never been in my industry. How are you going to tell me how to run an agency and you've never had an agency? No different than you saying to me that how's Andy going to come in? Andy has immediately said that he was not the top salesman in his deal. So why will I now come and have him teaching the salespeople inside the organization? Well, we're missing the connection, right? That has nothing to do with it that Andy was not successful. He's successful in what he's done in a marketing standpoint. That's what your problem is that you need someone to train these folks in that space. So why do we not connect the dots there? I was missing the mark and going after larger, more complex sales because I was still using the old methodology of spreadsheet, Andy. And when I would go into organizations that had been dealing with, even if they were dealing with larger brokerage firms, and even if those brokerage firms didn't walk the talk, right? But at least they came out and gave the talk that said, hey, here are all the things you should do, even though we're going to take your ass back and fully insured. You know what I mean? But here's the things that we're going to do, right? So at least you had the conversation. I couldn't even have the conversation. Because I was still using my same skill set to go after the larger game, and it didn't work. And when he gave me that diversity of thought, it changed the ball game. And I can say that on multiple cases where we're looking at thought. So when we think about an organization, with other thoughts, other people, when we say female. So we get back to the diversity that we're talking about, right? Because diversity of thought also still encompasses all the other diversity issues that exist out there. But we're looking at it and saying, how you think is how you'll actually perform. And if you think differently, you'll perform.
The trap is you want the industry to evolve as long as you don't have to. And here's the deal. Here's the deal.
Good,
so
that's it.
Where we're going, like the grand scheme of this whole thing, and when we look at the organizations in this industry that are trying to push this industry forward, you think of the Nahoos, or what's the acronym now?
I don't even know.
They change names. But the Nahoos and all these other groups, the Rosettas, Nelson Griswold, shout out to Nelson, the Kevin Trokis, that are trying to help agencies maintain independence.
Yes.
Right? Because
correct.
Everybody's complaining about the M&A activity.
Yeah.
Oh, it's out of control. It's going faster than it's ever had before. They all want to fight for this dependence, but here's the problem. You're the problem.
Yes.
The reason there's so much activity in M&A is because you refuse to change. You would still be here.
Correct.
As an independent agency if you had the ability or the desire to adapt.
Yes.
We talked about this using another sports analogy. Back in 1985, Kareem, if you watch college football.
Yep.
And I said, how many teams in college football run the option offense?
Everybody.
I would say it was 25, 30%.
It was a lot of people.
Even teams in the Big Ten. I think Michigan ran the option.
Yeah.
I mean, option was a common offensive strategy.
Correct.
In 1985.
Correct.
You know how many are left in 2022?
Tell me.
2. And they're part of our military academies. Army and the Air Force are the only schools.
Wow.
Georgia Tech was there too because until their coach retired.
Right.
Or got fired. Army and Air Force are the only schools left that run the option. We now live in an
RPO world, baby.
world of football. This is why I'm frustrated as a Wisconsin fan. We're still proud of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Freaking get a quarterback who can throw.
Sophomore. For all of you.
No, not fired up. But it's because we live in an RPO world now of college football.
Correct.
This is what I'm talking about. We have so many agencies out there still proud of the damn option when they're getting killed by the teams, the agencies running the RPO.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's what's interesting. It's so much to the point of the norm and usual that I'm not even concerned about agencies coming behind me. Because I know what we've done is so different.
They're not going to catch up.
You can't catch up, man. So when they're coming in and talking about something, they're like, oh yeah, we were doing that 4 years ago. We were doing that 5 years ago. Oh wow, you already yeah, here and here's the track record for what we've done that. And so I'm never concerned about the competition. Now somebody say, oh well, you're always concerned about competition. I'm concerned with the competition right here.
You got
bro.
one competitor, the guy
This
in
is
the
it.
mirror.
This is it. This
And
is
you're
it.
never going to stop growing.
I'm never going to stop growing, bro. It's part of who I am. It's how I got here.
Yeah.
Because all of the other, since we're on this point of talking diversity, I need to go in my soapbox, which is I could have all the reasons as to why. And anybody who's listening and watching us, I'm probably one of the only African American benefit advisors that people have met. And I know probably the 10 or so that everybody knows. I mean, there's a few. An agency owner, many of them work for other agencies, but an actual agency owner so I can have all the reasons why this couldn't work, it wouldn't work, nobody see anything looks like me. And let's face it, and my team is 99% African American, right? So that's a different thing in our industry, although it's good and it's chic and it came with a whole lot of challenges along the way. But what I ended up finding out, Andy, is that it wasn't the fact of whether we were African American, it was how we were positioning ourselves. And so I thought myself through that obstacle of all of the things that my perceptions, because a lot of it was my own perception, right? It was my own biases of what I thought people were thinking about me. And when I really sat down with the folks who were really looking for shifts and change, they embraced everything I was saying. It had nothing to do with me being black at that point in time. It had everything to do with how I showed up, how I delivered the message, and what success they had from implementing what I put in place. And so when I think about the diversity of thought, and I think about having other people come in, had I not been open to someone outside of the industry giving me insight, I'd be sitting in the same place.
Absolutely. No, I think we've made our point.
We have.
And we're two men, I think, that agree that you have to walk your talk. So we're also excited to talk about what you and I are going to be doing with this.
Yeah.
Right? You and I are coming together in a collaboration.
Yep.
Because we both believe that if we're going to sit here and talk about the lack of training for leaders of our industry, we've got to do something to help fix it.
Correct.
And so I'm excited about the collaboration we'll be doing that we're going to be bringing to the industry. And so let's talk about it.
And it's not for everybody.
It's not going to be for everybody. No, I mean, you talked about it, right? I hate to use the status quo because it's such a cliche phrase nowadays. But if you're just cool with how the industry is right now because you've got a great lifestyle business, you're playing golf 3 days a week, whatever it is, God bless you.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be for you, but if you are like us and you agree with us that, yeah, you're right. If we're going to make this industry succeed in the future, we have got to evolve with the way things have evolved in this world. Hell, look what happened with the pandemic. I mean, it's fast-forwarded evolution.
Correct.
So let's talk about how we fix this. So we talked about a lack of training.
Yes.
All right, Kareem, cool. I'm going to put you on the spot. Awesome. How should I be training my future leaders?
That's a great question. And I think what we've done is we've broken that down into a couple different thoughts, right? And if we look at training future leaders, we know that there's some things that we got to do that's counterintuitive to what we've been doing, right? And so in looking at training them, allowing them to have the freedom to have their brand, allowing them to be able to grow and be themselves inside of our organizations is something that we frowned upon. It's something that we've simply said that is going to detract from us if we allow them to be them. And I think what you and I have looked at and said, well, that's so far from the truth. The thing about it is that when we've trained folks efficiently and effectively to be their authentic selves, giving them the ability to be able to grow in a space for which a culture that we ultimately as an agency owner have to do, we've got to come back and say to them that, you know what, Andy, it's okay to be you. It's okay to be you within this space. It's okay for you to build your brand, and because the people are buying from you. They're not buying from Great Lakes Benefit Group. They give a damn about Great Lakes Benefit Group. That just happens to be the team that you play on. But who are they buying from? They're buying from Andy Neary. So if I'm going to train differently in that space, I've got to be able to put you in a place where you're feeling comfortable about who you are, how you get in front of folks, and what that looks. And I think that we have just done a poor job of allowing that to happen in agencies because once again, we've been training them the same.
Yeah, Seth Denson said this to me once, and I still use it to this day. It's more agencies would have success if they realize they're renting the brand of their producers. Their producers are not renting their logo.
Ooh. You got to say that again, man.
More agencies would have success if they realized that they're renting the brand of their producers are not renting their logo. And I think this is the mistake the ABC houses make in this industry.
I agree.
Their philosophy is shut up, go sell our logo. And that's why you have the transfer portal where one producer moves from this logo to this logo to this logo to this logo to this logo because they have no brand.
They have no brand. They have no brand.
And if we would, this is the part where I come in and my business comes in with Complete Game Consulting. Kareem, it is 2022, about to be 2023.
Yes.
You and I agree it's a relationship business, right?
Correct.
So when you talk about let your people build brands, do you realize it's never been easier to build a relationship with someone today before they've ever met you?
Yes.
There's this thing out there, insurance industry, please take note of this. It's called the internet and social media.
I'm guilty.
We're all people of it, right? And I have people who tell me I'm a gimmick because I'm on social media as much as I do.
Wow.
But I said, you know what? You know how many advisors call me and say, I feel like I know you already.
Right.
And I've never met them.
Right.
It's how you build relationships.
Yes.
It's not as easy to take somebody out for golf, cup of coffee at dinner these days as it used to be, right? Because that's how you used to build a relationship with a prospect.
Correct.
But today, because of technology, you can actually build relationships with people before you met them. How nice would it be? You talk about letting your producers be brands. How cool would it be if your producers could go into discovery meetings and the prospects already feel like they know?
Man, that would be important. That would be so critical to looking at the success, because now we take where a person has been and they may have had little success and you increase the odds. And the things that we're looking at as agency owners and trainers in that space, I'm looking at how many different ways can I remove obstacles and increase your ability to be able to win. But if I'm not utilizing today's tactics to be able to do that, then I'm going to still end up with results that don't mirror what it is that I'm focused in on. And I think to me that becomes a bigger issue, is that I'm still trying to go out and capture wild game using the old tactics. And everybody else is looking at me like, is that guy still over there doing the same thing, trying to get a different result? He's never going to catch anything.
Think about this. Again, we're full of sports analogies.
Yeah.
Give me a name, first name that comes to mind in professional sports when I say brand.
Jordan. I go right to Jordan.
LeBron James.
James.
Tiger
Woods.
You insert them all, especially in team sports.
Yes.
What would happen if the team they played for said, you know what? We don't allow our players to have brands.
Oh, man. They wouldn't keep that player.
Do you know why these guys get paid
They wouldn't keep that player.
$30, $40 million a year? They put asses in seats.
All day long.
Because of their brand.
Because of
How does that tie to our industry? You let your producers grow a brand. Let them be themselves. That button seat is revenue in your bottom line.
Bottom line. That is it. And when the culture is right inside of the agency, the things that we think are the reasons why someone would leave, we again begin to diminish that opportunity because we've allowed them to grow in a space. I think you and I talked about this earlier. The reason most people leave is when they can't grow, man. I mean, anytime there's a spot where I can't grow, where there's not an environment for growth, where there's not opportunity to look at where the next level is, then I feel stifled. And when I feel stifled, then normally what do? I act out, right? I act out in the sales meetings. No different than a sports player. I act out in what I should be doing. I'm going to do something totally different. So now, when I allow you to be who you are, now we're not saying, shit, you can go out and do whatever the hell you want to do. We're saying build your brand. Build your brand. Have it. But let me give you the freedom of doing that. And as long as it's not violating any of the things that we have just as agency principle things that we do, then let them have it. Why wouldn't you? And in that brand, what you've also done is that you've allowed yourself to now have, again, diversity of thought, because you got other people that are taking the same messaging. Everybody's not going to listen to me and you, Andy. I mean, it's just not, they're not going to like our style. It doesn't matter how much we do this thing, bro. It's not going to happen. However, when we allow you to establish your brand and you got your following and you got your market, man, I allow you to be yourself. It's a game changer.
Yeah. Let's talk about communication on that end.
Yeah.
You know, talking about training for the new leadership of today.
Yeah.
Communication over the message being more important than the product pitch. That's something we've talked about a lot is,
yes.
communication. It's what my company specializes in helping. What we're getting at is if you help your producers be more successful
Yes.
using today's tactics,
Yes.
the odds of you finding your next great leader just went up because you're creating a culture where you're open to diversity of thought.
Correct.
And that's going to become a place I want to work for, that I'm not going to leave. Look at some of your employees like Rob and Percy. They're not. They've had plenty of job offers. Trust me. You're Michelle.
Yeah.
Has had plenty of offers to go work for. Your own clients have tried to take her away.
Yes.
And they're like, why would I leave this?
Why would I leave this?
It's because you're open to diversity of thought. And
Correct.
so let's talk about the importance of message over product.
Well, I think that's something that we find that there's a disconnect in, right? The communication and looking at what the messaging is and helping advisors to have the proper messaging. What we always find is product, man. We sit down and we take you through a brochure and we tell you all about the products and all the bells and the whistles and, you go through your little spiel. But none of that is the proper communication that you're looking that's going to help to move the agency forward. That's simply focusing in on the product. So now it becomes, as I always share with you, the idea of the month club. People are all over the place. They're trying to sell this. They're trying to sell it. None of that has to do with the proper messaging. And what I find in messaging is just top down, right? Leadership creates the proper messaging, which everyone else will fall in line with when the messaging is right. The problem is, what is the messaging, Andy? And when you're working with these agencies and you're listening to that, one of the things you shared with me and I thought was ironic, but I knew it had to be the gospel truth, right? Is that you can get everybody here in the rank and file excited about the process, but the one person who you need to be on board with is no longer there. So it's differences in communication now. You're telling me that we're embracing all these things, but you're still doing the old stuff while you got us doing the new stuff.
And you is often the leader.
Yes, as the leader, as the unit. So tell me, when you talk about communication and you're looking at what you see within agencies today, what do you see from a messaging standpoint? How are they communicating, and what would they look at doing differently in today's world?
Yeah, it's a good. This might ruffle feathers.
Okay.
Because I will say the guilty party is often the people at the top.
Okay.
And that is, we know we need to evolve, so damn it, team, go evolve. I'm just going to go sit over here in my corner and run my book of business. But with that being said, the team is craving it.
Yes.
Right? Your team's made up of people 20s and their 30s, 40s, and they see the need for the change.
Correct.
I hear these people talk to me about this every week.
Right.
And the leadership wants it until it's time for them to display it. And it goes back to what you said with the lack mentality. All it takes is one thing to go the wrong way, a lost account. A piece of business we should have had, we didn't get. And that meant all of a sudden, all of this work on we need to evolve goes out the door, and it's, no shit, we got to do it right back to it. Short term, go out and go talk to everybody. Win now, win now, win now. And it's like you just set your agency back another 5 years.
Right. So let me ask you this. I know this.
But your team is craving evolution.
So if we talk about evolution, one of the things you and I were talking about is exploring the balance in that communication, right? Because we know that there can be a whole lot of rah-rah in this deal. And somebody could say, you and I, like, oh, here are these two guys. These are the rah-rah guys. And we're like, no, there's some excitement in this because we're passionate about what we're doing. But we walk the fucking talk.
It's got to have substance behind the rah-rah. So talk about that. Your analogy, your story around this is so good.
So as we were talking about this and looking at communication and looking at communication styles, right? And looking at how we get messaging out, we were just comparing and contrasting our leaders, some of our previous leaders that have been in the best seat in the house, right? That seat called the White House, right? And what we looked at is that when you talk about how people were considered, and one of the things that I brought up to you originally was that when people looked at George Washington to G.W. Bush, that one of the things that they talked about is that they always said that, well, you know what, he wasn't the smartest guy, right? And that was all based upon their perception of his communication. I would always argue and say, well, we could say that, but yet he's put some very influential people around him to make him smarter. And I always think that that's the smartest person in the room. What we've talked about
the Henry Ford.
Ford.
With any question I have, I can hit the right button and call
I can hit the right button and focus. And so we were talking about just the styles and delivery, and we were talking about President Obama's style, very charismatic. And I was saying to you, I said, you're very charismatic. And one of the things that I had someone to challenge me on was say, okay, listen to the charisma, but also go back and focus in on what's being said. And I'm like, because I'm in a space where I have the ability to communicate and oratorical skills, you can be caught into the excitement of the conversation.
He's a great orator.
Yes. And anytime there's a great orator, you can move people. Fantastic. Then you start looking at people who don't have the ability to communicate as well. What they may be saying may be accurate and true. However, the delivery model, and we went over and said, okay, there's President Trump, and you had this situation. So we got President Obama, where we're looking at this. And so people will challenge me and say, well, I'm not leaning one way or the other. We're just talking about the process of communication, right? Now, in this situation, we're looking up and saying, okay, well, in this communication, whether we like the communication or not, the way that President Trump outlined it was the fact that, okay, if it was blue, it was blue. In the other case, we're looking and saying, well, it's blue, but it may have some shade of green in there. Doesn't make it any different, just saying that the communication styles are different, right? And so what we've got to look at is the messaging, and what is the messaging that we're looking to get. And so sometimes you can look at that and say it's rah-rah. We can look at the things that we're doing right now, and people will say, oh, well, it's just rah-rah. It's just Andy and Kareim getting all hyped up and rah-rah. And we're saying, no, the substance behind what we're telling you is that when you get past the rah-rah, here is one of the things that you need to do to take action on. And so I think for us, what we're looking at is saying that if we compare and contrast the worlds of communication, it needs to be clear, it needs to be authentic, it needs to be something that people see you walking it from the beginning and carrying it out throughout the rest of the process. And I think that there's a disconnect when we look at agency owners in terms of what you're communicating. So if I'm saying to you, we need to grow in this way, but yet I'm sitting in my corner enjoying my lifestyle, then what have I just communicated to the team over here? They don't believe for 1 minute that I believe that this is the way that we should go, because nothing that I'm doing is lining up with what it is that I'm saying. And what we're saying is that it's gotta be a great balance of, there has to be some inspiration. There has to be some motivation, because, as you said earlier, we all crave those things. So I love the inspiration. I love the motivation and the things that I got when I would listen to President Obama. I thought it was fantastic. Fantastic. Now I looked at the other side and I said, oh, well, I also can compare and contrast and say, okay, with President Trump, there's the things that he lays out. And though I did not like the delivery of it, right? We're talking about the delivery. Didn't like the messaging of it, but the message in its state and what was being said, I could agree with that at that particular point in time. So there'll be some people that would challenge me. Of course, being African American, how do you say, well, this is not about policy. This is not about politics. This is not about any of those things. I'm just talking about communication styles. And so a lot of times when I'm talking, and what I realized in my own agency was, because I'm a communicator that tends to seem to be on the inspirational and motivational side, having Rob with me, right? Rob is an introvert. Rob is very sarcastic. Rob brings a whole different communication style to what we're trying to get. But what Rob brought to me when he started getting me to change and think about it is that he started bringing some additional substance, right? So here it is that we were excited about it, but then there was the substance of, hey, do you understand unit cost? Do you understand logistics in this? Do you understand how this works? And I'm like, no, I hadn't. I didn't think about any of those things. So when you blend those worlds of having the rah-rah along with the substance, it's a game changer.
And I think that's the point you're trying to make, is you got to have a mix of sizzle and substance, right?
Yes.
You can have rah-rah and say absolutely nothing.
Correct.
If you really, I think the example you gave is somebody had you watch one of Obama's speeches with just the captions. Mm-hmm. And if you just read the captions, the reality is he didn't actually say anything.
It was a challenge.
But on the flip side, with Trump, and people hear just that word, and they make him cringe, they're not even going to be open to what he has to say when he actually might be saying something that's correct.
Correct.
So as a leader, you've got to have that mix of sizzle and substance.
You got to have a balance.
So should we talk about what we're going to do?
I like it. Let's talk.
It's hard to believe we're already 90 minutes in.
Man, that's just what we do, bro.
We got to do this more often.